These are the notes for LT2 and the Momentum, Impulse, and Collisions unit. And for LT2, we are looking at how the time of impact can affect net force acting on an object. Okay, so we're looking at how long a force is applied. Think of that in terms of how it's going to affect that force and ultimately how it's going to change the motion of an object. So notice the title is a little strange for LT2, but hopefully we know by now that F is for force, T is for time, and then remember the triangle is actually delta, the letter P is momentum. So this is how it relates to a change in momentum. Okay, change in momentum. I have a picture up here that we're going to refer to quite a bit. It's not so important that you read the text right now, but it is important that you start to understand that an impulse changes momentum. We don't just say a force anymore, okay? Because when there's an applied force, it has to be in contact with something, and so it's going to be over a certain amount of time. And so we're going to break this up and start and look first at how does force affect a change in momentum. And we already know that it's a net force that will result in an object changing its position. And so we have to have a net force that's greater than 0. And if we had a bigger net force, then we would ultimately see a bigger change in momentum. Okay, there's countless examples of this, just ridiculous amounts. Think about golf. All right, think about golf. I'll confess, I'm not so good at it, but I used to be a heck of a Wii golf player with the Tiger Woods golf that was on the old Wii. But think about if you're going to putt a ball versus use a driver. Okay, a putter versus a driver. Most of us have probably putt before, and you know that you don't put a very big force on that ball because we don't want it to change its position substantially. You don't want it to skip holes and knock a little kid in the head 4 holes over, right? So it's just a little force. If you're on the driving range, though, a little force is going to get you laughed at, right? You want to hit that ball as far as you can hit it. So a bigger net force is going to take that ball off the tee a greater distance. Okay, so that's just one example, and we'll talk about many more. We take this a little farther, as I mentioned. We aren't so much worried about just a net force anymore. Now we are worried about an impulse causing a change in momentum. Causes a change in momentum. Okay, that delta P. And hopefully you saw in the crash, the physics of crashes, that video, where it isn't just force anymore, it's how long that force is applied that helps to determine the safety or lack thereof of car crashes. Okay, this right here is the impulse, so that we represent with an I for the variable. This entire thing, I think we know by now, m is mass, change in velocity is this. That is our change in momentum. So an impulse is equal to the change in momentum, and it's also the cause. Okay, that's what ends up causing this to happen. So if we look up here, this guy's pushing this car. This person's pretty happy for having her car pushed, but whatever. If this person just puts a big force on there, but then just takes his hands off, that car's not going to move. Okay, it might rock it a little bit, but we've probably all had to push something out of the road or push something heavy to move it around the room. Maybe you're reorganizing your bedroom, and you apply that force. Okay, you want a big force, and you want to keep your hands on the car, keep your hands on your dresser if you're moving it around the room. You also want a long time. Okay, we want both of those things to be true to move that car the most. These two things together is called the impulse momentum relationship. That sounds fancy, but all it's saying is that an impulse causes a change in momentum, and they'll always be the same. So I'm just going to try to break this down into a few more examples, because this target isn't loaded with math. Okay, this target is more conceptual. So if we look at this impulse momentum relationship, let's look at, here we are in Shepherd. A lot of people hunt, okay, or maybe you target practice. But if we wanted to apply this to a .22 caliber, so just a little sporting gun here, a .22 rifle versus a .22 pistol. Okay, a .22 rifle versus a .22 pistol. For those of you who don't know, a rifle shoots farther than a pistol. All right, same caliber bullet, same amount of kaboom, but the rifle bullet will go farther and be more accurate. And it has nothing to do with the force. The same amount of gunpowder exists between the two. Okay, force is the same. Yet, I'm gonna skip a line there intentionally. The change in momentum is much greater for the rifle. So if we have the same force applied, why is it that the bullet goes further with a rifle than it does with the same caliber pistol? The only other variable we haven't talked about is time. So think about it. That force is applied during the entire journey of the bullet through the barrel of the gun. Okay, the whole time. So the time factor is a lot greater for the rifle than the pistol because it's a longer barrel. So that force is applied for a longer period of time. That causes the bullet to go farther. You've probably never really thought about why does it go farther, but that's the idea. Extend the time, the change in momentum is going to be greater. Let's talk about a time or a situation where you wouldn't want a short time to stop. Okay, it's more of a safety thing. Now this is going to be a fantastic drawing right here. But I'm going to have somebody bungee jumping. So here's their little hook. Here's the cord. And because I can't draw, that cord is going to hook to their feet. This is something. Do not ever let a person hook a cord to your feet if you're bungee jumping, all right? But we know that bungee straps have some give to them, right? So when this person reaches the end of this line, it's not just going to stop immediately, right? It's going to stretch, and it's going to increase their time to stop. Well, if we increase their time to stop here, and we have the same change in momentum, this person's body has to come down to zero. But if we can make this number big, that force shrinks down. And that's what we kept seeing with the idea of using seat belts and airbags in vehicles. Increase the time to stop, that decreases the force on the person. Now, it'd be a horrible idea if somebody ever says, hey, you know, our bungee cords, we don't have them today, so we're going to hook a chain around your foot. Same thing, man. You're going to get a thrill going down, but we're going to stop you with a chain. They're going to bring your momentum to zero either way. But imagine if you come to a quick stop with that chain. So this number gets really small. This has to be the same no matter what. That means that force is going to be huge. Okay, so now you've got a huge force on your body. That's a bad idea. Okay, a bad idea if we're talking about bungee jumping or a safety situation. Got another strange example, because you're probably getting used to my strange examples. I gotta figure out how to get this up here. Do it like this. Alright, if your cupboard's at home or anything like mine, you know you pull something out of the top one, and you just hope for the best, you hope that nothing falls out. Well, it's going to be a sad day. And you're going to pull something out of the cupboard, and we're going to have a bowl come out after you. Alright, so here's my best attempt at a bowl. It's not a very good attempt, so we're going to label that bowl. And so here you are, and you can sense it coming, and that's a very big bowl. Holy moly, alright? You can sense it coming, so you're not very happy. You've got a couple options, okay, because this is all pretty far-fetched. Would you want the bowl to hit and stick to your head, like just hit and rest on your head like an oversized hat? Do you think that would be less painful? Or would you want the bowl to hit you and bounce back up? And you can be all, cool about it. Bowl's going to hit you in the head, bounce back up, you're going to snag it like you planned it, all right? So in order to be less painful, would you want it to stick or would you want it to bounce back? Okay, hopefully you've come up with some sort of opinion in your head. I'm not here to know if you're right or wrong anyways. Think about what bouncing does, okay? If this thing bounces, it's going to have a change in velocity to hit your head, and your head is also going to throw it back. So actually, bouncing causes a bigger change in momentum. Okay, bouncing means a bigger change in momentum. That's not good, because we know a bigger change in momentum here is going to be a bigger impulse on you. And your head is the thing doing the moving here, right, moving the bowl. So a bigger number here, we're going to have a bigger impulse there. Okay? So anytime an object bounces, we talked about cars like hitting a wall and bouncing off, that's worse. We want crumple zones, okay? Because bouncing increases the change in momentum. This means increased impulse, which is probably going to be an increased force on you. It's more of an ouch. Now, even though this is a bad situation, and cars and accidents are a bad situation, we've learned to use this idea. There's something called a Pelton water wheel. And so if you don't know what that looks like, grab your smartphone, use your Chromebook, Google it, and I'll date myself. I used to love the show Little House on the Prairie. Like, I'd get off the bus and head to Grandma's house, because, you know, Grandma's have cookies. So cookies and Little House on the Prairie every day. Really healthy kid, all right? But a Pelton water wheel is like what Pa uses at the sawmill. It's this big wooden thing, and water falls on it, all right? Because back then, nobody's cranking on their Honda generator if they want to run the sawmill. So what's happened, what we've learned to do with these water wheels is we curved the blades. So instead of the water just hitting and trickling down to move the wheel, to power the sawmill or whatever it is, it causes the water to bounce. And what we just learned here is water bouncing creates a bigger change in momentum, which means you're going to have a bigger impulse on the water wheel, and it's going to turn easier. All right, so there's just an example of how we use these as an advantage, this idea of bouncing. We'll talk more about it, but if you've ever watched anybody like karate, I don't know, I'll probably say the wrong thing, taekwondo, whatever. If you've watched people like break boards with their hands or their feet, and you watch them, it's like their hands hit and bounce off. They intentionally will bounce to try to create a greater impulse on the board. Like their feet, they don't follow through. They just hit real quick with their feet and then release off the board to try to create a bigger impulse to break the board. All right, so that is it for LT2. Good luck.